Hi, I'm Ron Ozer, and I'm here in Arden, Delaware, which is just north of Wilmington, Delaware. And it's hard to believe, but I'm going to be speaking for the next 30 minutes. When I first heard the idea, I thought, wow, what am I going to say for 30 minutes? But you can help me if you want. If you're on Facebook or on YouTube or whatever, you can send a comment. If you have a question, I can try to answer it. If you're interested in Arden, we have an unusual town that I live in here, or in our music series. I'll be talking about all those things. So I was given a list of questions to help me think about what to talk about today, and one of those questions was how I got into jazz music, which I'm not a jazz musician. I'm a presenter of concerts here in Delaware, and I'm also a chemical engineer by trade. So, who was the first musician you remember hearing, jazz musician? My father used to get these big Book of the Month Club sets and Time Life music sets um, back when they were really cheap. And I remember there were these box sets like History of Jazz, Smithsonian History of Jazz, and there was Time Life set of Louis Armstrong. And I think that probably was the first jazz I ever heard, was actually like the early 20s Dixieland influenced kind of Louis Armstrong jazz from that era, and I think maybe some Bix Beiderbecke. Um, and I think my brother might have had that Smithsonian set. Um, and I would sneak into my brother's room and I would play his records. I would play his Yes records and his Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and also his Smithsonian Jazz collection, and a lot of other things. So I see someone's online. Okay, there's a nice thank you from Gail, and thank you to Gail for inviting me for this. Um, I'm producing a bunch of concerts here in Delaware, and one of the concerts I'm producing is Lakeisha Benjamin coming up in a week. That's March the 5th. Lakeisha Benjamin and Pursuance, a full band on stage. We have a 200 seat hall here. It's a 170-year-old barn, and Lakeisha had this amazing album come out in 2020 called Pursuance. It's the Coltrane's, so it's Alice and John Coltrane. A friend of mine wrote a major review of that album, great rave review, and I know it's popular on the Newport Jazz Festival group that I'm on Facebook. So I was excited to bring her here. I saw her at the Winter Jazz Fest in New York City, January 2020, just before the pandemic. So another question that I was suggested to ask was, what was the first jazz concert I ever went to? And I think it was probably Pat Metheny and Ornette Coleman at Cornell University in the later 1980s, the Song X tour. And I had not heard the Song X album. And boy, if you've ever heard that album, it doesn't sound like your typical Pat Metheny album. I don't even think it sounds like your typical Ornette Coleman album, but maybe some of the Ornette Coleman albums. But it's some seriously noisy music. And I wasn't quite ready for it, to be honest. I was expecting something more like Pat Metheny's more um, accessible music. And of course, Pat has done a wide variety of music over the years. What was the first jazz album I purchased with my own money? That's really hard to think about because I didn't really buy jazz albums in my teens. Um, I was actually into pop and prog rock and all different kinds of music, classic rock now they'd call it, and then later into classical and even opera. Before I started to get interested in jazz, I think probably I might have bought a Duke Ellington or an Al Jarreau album. Um, Duke Ellington, interestingly enough, I knew because I was a fan of Steely Dan, and Steely Dan on Pretzel Logic did the song East St. Louis Tootaloo, which is a Duke Ellington song. So that was my way into Duke Ellington. interestingly enough, now I'm a big fan of Newport Jazz, where Ellington made such a splash at the very first one in 1955. So, talking about my current projects, I've already mentioned Lakeisha Benjamin. I'll talk about it a little bit more. Um, we also have um, coming up this Saturday, we have a group of songwriters called Black Opry Review. This woman, Holly G, started this group uh, in Nashville when she noticed that a lot of these up and coming black songwriters in Americana, country, roots music weren't getting the notice she thought they should. So she thought, let's put them together and let's start a conversation about black people in the history of country music. And they performed in Philadelphia, five songwriters kind of in the round, all sharing songs about a week and a half ago. And Dan DeLuca of the Philadelphia Inquirer wrote a wonderful review, which I've been posting and sharing. And he thankfully he mentions our concert coming up on Saturday. Some of the artists include Lizzie No, Jet Holden, Aaron Vance, Roberta Lee. Um, all be performing two sets of music, and a lot of the songs are quite strong, emotional songs from what I've heard. And they're not all country. Some are folk. Some are kind of more Americana. Really interesting songwriters. So that's on Saturday. Then the following Saturday, March the 5th, Lakeisha Benjamin and her band. That's just one big set of music, um, focused on the Coltrane's, Alice and John Coltrane. But I'm sure she'll share some of her own music as well. She's been a band leader for a number of years. In fact, she's going to do a master class while she's here in Arden for some students, local jazz students, including the Music School of Delaware and possibly a few other locations where people have expressed interest. So I'm glad to be able to facilitate that. Also coming up in Arden, something a particular interest of mine. Um, let me talk a little bit about the history of Arden first. I live in this intentional utopian community in Delaware, and it was started in 1900 by some eccentrics in Philadelphia. And in fact, the WHYY TV in Philly just did a 30-minute episode of their show, um, Movers and Shakers, that is all about Arden. And I appear on it briefly, talking about the music. In the history of music in Arden, we had Leadbelly perform here in 1947. And that was just 2 years before he died. And the year after, Pete Seeger, before he was well known, when he was a really progressive folk singer, actually um, campaigning for Henry Wallace for president at that time. Arden had a real progressive tone throughout its career, throughout its history. Mother Bloor, the leader of the American Communist Party, lived here. Upton Sinclair, who wrote The Jungle, lived here. Um, Architects, potters, painters, actors. We had a summer stock theater here with great performers like Jack Klugman and Anthony Perkins and Barbara Bel Geddes in our town in the 50s. In fact, um, some musicians remember that have come through town from that time. Roger McGuinn actually was here as a young boy with his mother, who was working press. Roger McGuinn of the Byrds, who performed here a couple of years ago. So, also coming up in Arden, the next show after Lakeisha is Stu and Heidi. Stu is a Broadway composer and also an indie rock, uh, kind of a cult classic band from the 90s, the Stu and the Negro Problem. He wrote this musical for Broadway with Heidi called Passing Strange, that was won the Tony Award for Best Book of a Musical in 2008 and was filmed by Spike Lee for HBO. and he's since worked with Spike Lee further. He performs in cabaret, teaches in New York City, and he'll be coming here to perform songs with Heidi and in a trio format. I'm really excited about Stu coming here. Stu is just a wonderful musician. He's also going to do a master class at the Cab Calloway School of the Arts here in Wilmington. He's going to give them a talk about how to have a career in the arts, which I think he's going to focus on writing your own material, which of course is, was his big thing. And he was able to take his autobiography and turn it into songs and turn it into a musical. In fact, a friend of mine was instrumental in helping uh, bring that along to production in New York in its original form. And it's just great to know all these presenters now. And I'll tell you a little bit about why I know so many presenters, even though I'm a small fish, really, only producing 25 shows a year. Um, and Stu and Heidi, that's March 18th here in Arden, um, where that show was supposed to happen 3 different times during the pandemic, and you can imagine what it's been like trying to reschedule it each time. And even now, we still have to take a lot of protocols seriously. Stu doesn't want to just go into any small classroom and teach. I can understand that. I teach, and I prefer if everybody in the classroom is masked. So I know that feeling. Um, I want to mention also that I'm going to a great music festival in Knoxville at the end of March, which I highly recommend. It's the Big Ears Fest in Knoxville. It's at like 10 locations, and I was going to go in 2020 for the first time, but now, of course, it was canceled. And then last year it was supposed to happen at the end of in the fall, I think, and then they had to cancel it again. Great musicians are going to be there, like Marc Ribo, who's coming here in April. Um, the band Low that I really love, Shabaka Hutchins and the Sons of Kemet will be there. Amazing sax player with a band. I can't even think of all the people. John Zorn is a major presence at the festival. Um, really, I don't. I was going to actually call up a list of everybody who's at Big Ears, but if you love progressive jazz music or just great independent creative music, um, Patty, they're also going to have some big names like Patti Smith is going to be there. Sparks, who had that documentary recently, is performing there. They're not performing much, and so I would recommend highly going to Big Ears. Um, and if you go, let me know. Maybe I can run into you. I don't. I'm actually going all by myself, so far I don't know anyone who's going. So what else? Oh, the next show I have, April 3rd, is Marc Ribo's Ceramic Dog. A really more of a rock show, but he's a rock and jazz guitarist. If you don't know Marc Ribo, maybe you know the Tom Waits album, Swordfish Trombones, which has a lot of Marc Ribo on it, um, or Elvis Costello's albums from the 90s have a lot of Marc Ribo guitar on them. So he's a unique individualist in terms of his guitar style. He's also very progressive. Um, he's kind of part of the resistance, if you will, of the last few years, last 5 years. And his last few albums actually were quite political. But his music is you know, it's more than just politics. It's 30 years now of really great, intense, explosive music. Really, his band. I saw them at one of those small clubs in the village at the Winter Jazz Fest a few years ago. He does quieter shows too. I know he does soundtrack shows. I know for Creative Alliance, where my friend Josh was booking, he's done like a electric guitar soundtrack to silent films right there in the space at Creative Alliance. I haven't done that kind of show yet. In fact, this is my first Marc Ribo show. That's Sunday, April 3rd. Marc Ribo, it's on sale, and that's going to be a wonderful show. He has a real following, definitely. Um, let's see where we are in time. We're about 15 minutes in, so I should probably tell you a few more. We also do comedy here. We have a comedian, Christian Finnegan, April 9th. We have an EDM show that was delayed from January. We're having it on April 15th. Band called, DJ, I guess, electronic musician, Future Primitive with a PH, Future Primitive, all one word. He is the musician Rain, who one of my producers, George Brocklesby, is really into electronic music, and he does the lighting for our shows. So he's rigging up a special lighting system with lasers, well, something like lasers for that show. So that's another show coming up. Um, Juliana Barlow, I think, is the other show we have booked right now. Another electronic musician, great musician, and on Mother's Day, May the 8th. So I see Gail making some comments here. She loves Shabaka Hutchings. I love Shabaka Hutchings, really. I think he might be one of my favorites. I get kind of mesmerized watching him perform on stage. I think I saw him at Le Poisson Rouge the last time I saw him. So some other questions I have here. Let's see. I talked about the history of Arden. Our shows started like 25 years ago. Actually, the first show was Bella Fleck and Tony Trischka in a duo banjo show. This was before my time in 1997. I took over in the early 2000s, and we grew from like 3 shows a year to now about 25 shows a year. Now we're doing more outdoor shows thanks to the pandemic forced us to, and now we're just going to keep doing more starting in May this year. We're part of the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation funding, which is actually funding the Lakeisha Benjamin show with a grant. We're also part of their jazz touring network. And so we'll put together entire tours for groups of venues in the Mid-Atlantic states using the jazz touring network. One of the shows I did with them that I think is a great story. Donnie McCaslin, the sax player. Donnie was in David Bowie's final band, the Black Star Band, and recorded Black Star in the studio. And they didn't even know how sick he was. And they, the album came out, and then it was Bowie's birthday, and then Bowie died, or I forget the order, but then they were scheduled to do a week at the Village Vanguard. And so I went up to the Village Vanguard and went to see one of those shows. It was less than a week after Bowie died, and it was full, of course, and it was a really emotional show. They played 2 Bowie songs, instrumental, of course, including Warsaw from Low, which is really an amazing cover if you ever get a chance to hear it. Um, and I, of course, decided right away I wanted to have them in Arden. And as it worked out, they came almost exactly a year later. And it was right at the time of the Philly Loves Bowie Festival, which was the 1 year anniversary of Bowie's birthday and his passing. And they came here and they performed a couple Bowie songs, as well as his full uh, jazz show, um, which included some of the another person from the Black Star Band. I guess 2 other people from the Black Star Band. The other Black Star Band member was Mark Juliana, who I was disappointed didn't come with Donnie, and I ended up booking him and his quartet a couple years later. So these are all musicians that have meant a lot to me over the years. Who have we? I thought I made a list here actually of some of the key musicians that we've had. Um, I think it's in my in my bio. Let me just take a quick drink here. Um, we've had the Bad Plus a couple times. We've had John Schofield with a full jazz ensemble. We've had Robert Glasper. Um, it's hard to think of everybody we've had. Um, just a lot of great musicians have been here over the years. And as you can see from our series, jazz is just a part of it. We do cover folk music, bluegrass, um, indie rock music, classic rock music to some extent. Um, this past year, we've been lucky enough to book some underplay shows where bands that would normally not play a venue are as small as we are. So we had Yola Tango came and sold out easily. In September, we had Adrian Lenker from Big Thief here in November, and we have Los Lobos coming on March the 11th. I didn't mention it at first because it's been sold out since it went on sale. Los Lobos normally plays much bigger venues than us, um, so I'm pretty excited. Los Lobos in a couple weeks in our tiny little barn here in Delaware. They've been around for 40 years or more than 40 years now. Great band. So, some other questions I have received here. Oh, I did want to mention the New York City Winter Jazz Fest happens every January. If you've never been, and unfortunately it was canceled again this year, though it happened online, and I got to see Lakeisha do an amazing performance recorded for the New York City Winter Jazz Fest. And the New York Times even reviewed it and cited Lakeisha's performance as one of the few that really jumped out of the screen. Um, it's hard, to do a virtual performance and have it really grab people's interest. But go there if you can. New York City during the APAP conference. There's Global Fest, which I always go to, music bands from around the world, and the New York City Winter Jazz Fest, which is usually at like 10 different venues in the village, generally East Village, West Village. Poisson Rouge is kind of a hub, the bitter end. Some of the NYU sites, other places further east there. You can walk from place to place, and it's usually pretty cold, but it's worth it. You can go from 6 o'clock until 2 in the morning, and you can see like 7 or 8 bands all night long, easily. And that's how I saw Lakeisha. The first time I saw her was only in 2020. So how am I coping through this pandemic? Well, that's a tough question. The pandemic has been no fun in a lot of ways. I've tried to make it fun. Um, First by producing music when I could outdoors. In May of 2021, we managed to do our first outdoor concerts, and then I think we did a few little local festivals in 2020, but no, hardly anyone was touring, so we couldn't really bring people in. Um, but to be honest, I don't think I'm coping that well. I don't know that anybody is coping that well. Maybe people are, and I just don't hear about it. Um, my patience and my ability to work has been impacted. I've been reading that there's been a general decrease in the level of joy and positivity in the last 2 years in this country. And I can't help but see that in the students that I teach and in the enthusiasm at concerts that aren't, artists that people know. Trying to sell tickets for artists that people don't know as well is much harder, and it still is, in my opinion. Putting Los Lobos on sale, that's easy. But putting on 5 songwriters like we have Saturday that no one has heard and just say, "Come, we promise you'll like this." That's much harder. So what am I trying to do about it? I'm trying to figure out changes in my life now that can make a difference. I plan to stop teaching in the near future, um, either at the end of the semester or at the end of next semester. I've already talked with people about possible changes of jobs or even retiring, but I can't really afford to retire yet. But these are all things I'm thinking about, and I appreciate the question. I'm trying to be very honest about it. Do you have any advice for younger musicians to keep them encouraged? Well, I wrote out an idea for this, encouraging younger musicians to play as much as possible. Obviously, get practice, like they say, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. Um, but try to find your own unique sound, your own unique compositional style, something that's personal, something that feels like it's grown from yourself. These personal creative accomplishments are what are going to draw people to you, in my opinion, rather than marketing or some kind of some kind of social media presence. I see a lot of people working hard to just promote themselves, but it's the creativity, it's the creations that you make that create the opportunities. Um, it's a tough world though to be noticed, and just because you build it doesn't mean people will come. Um, but if you stay true to what feels right, you're more likely to succeed. So, what else do I want to talk about? I have a couple minutes left. Um, I've sort of hinted at it, but it's very hard to sell tickets right now. Um, some places, I have lots of friends that have these clubs, and these popular bands are all lining up to come through. You know, the Man Music Center in Philadelphia has announced Fish, and they've announced the Roots Picnic, and they've announced, these are going to be going like gangbusters, these shows. They'll be great. There's a lot of shows I want to go see. I have plans to go to New York to see shows in April, in May. I have going to big years. I have other festivals I want to go to. So it's just a little discouraging sometimes because people don't have a general knowledge of jazz, for example. So here in Delaware, trying to, I thought, for example, that just you having the word Coltrane would help bring people in, but it takes more than that. You gotta you gotta find a way to grab people. So I mean, I think the videos that I've been able to find, and even the video I took, which I just started reposting from 2020 today, that shows the real energy that Lakeisha Benjamin brings. She We're gonna have a good crowd, but I always want to sell more. And so when you're producing concerts, you're constantly looking at your ticket counts. So my final advice to you is go out and buy concert tickets. Or if you're really in the know, you can get on the guest list. At least you'll be in the room. But even better, buy concert tickets. Um, the Finally, um, we have here in Arden, we have this community dinner series. And interestingly enough, the Mardi Gras dinner is this week. So people that are going to go to this Black Opera Review concert, quite a few of them are going to be able to come at 6 o'clock and have a dinner, a shrimp etouffee, cooked by community people that live in this community and served to them, and it's low cost. And we actually have a vaccination requirement for dinner, and they have slowly expanded the dinners, but it's about as safe as we can make it for a dinner. Um, the concerts here are masked and vaccine proof required. We want to keep them as safe as possible as long as we can. A lot of places are dropping their requirements. We have to keep constantly figuring out what we're going to do, but this is what we're doing so far is we're keeping our requirements. So that's pretty much it. Ardenconcerts.com is our website. You can find us on Facebook at Arden Concert Guild, at Twitter, Arden Concerts, and on Instagram also, Arden Concerts. And thank you very much, Gail, for having me. I really appreciate it. I think we're almost out of time, but if there's any final words, I haven't had any questions from anybody else, but And I think I've gone through all the questions I have here. Um, I should let you know that I'm going from here to the Wilmington Public Library to see Pam Grier, the film star who was in one of my favorite films, Jackie Brown, and of course in a lot of great '70s films. So Pam Grier speaking for free at in Wilmington this evening. I think it's sold out, but right after this, I'm going to head down there. So so if you just happen to be in Delaware and you're at Pam Grier, say hi. That seems unlikely. Go out and buy concert tickets. That's definitely a message here. Everybody should buy concert tickets. Thank you very much. Thanks, Lynn. I think we're closing off soon here. Sorry to run to finish a little early. Oh, I see Gail had actually answered the question. How far do you book? How often do I present? Well, we probably no more than once a week, 3 times a month. Usually at least 2 months in advance, maybe 6 months in advance. Gail, you're going to turn this off then? Because I can't actually add comments here.